You know, I used to believe that the biggest reason people don't start a business is because they don't have money. That's what everyone says, right? Wala kasi akong puhunan. I don't have capital. Maybe next year when I save enough. I've heard it 1,000 times, and I've said it myself. But after everything I've learned, after failing, trying again, and seeing what truly works, I can tell you this. Money is never the real problem. Awareness is. What if I told you that you already have something right now that can be turned into a business, but you can't see it because you're too focused on what's missing? Most people think starting a business is about having more, but it's really about seeing more. You don't need more capital, you need more clarity. Because no matter how much you have, if you can't see opportunity, you'll stay broke. And no matter how little you have, if you can see potential, you'll always find a way. When I look back at my life, I realize how blind I was. I had opportunities sitting right in front of me, literally in my own home, but I didn't recognize them. Why? Because I was looking for something big, something shiny, something new. I thought success had to look like those people on social media. Brands, offices, investors, fancy packaging, and followers. I didn't realize that the seed of success was already in my hand. And that's the truth about business. You don't start with money, you start with awareness. You start by recognizing what's already around you. Because God, in His design, never creates lack. He doesn't make incomplete environments. He gives you something, skills, people, a small resource, a connection, that looks ordinary, but it's meant to multiply when you use it. The problem is not the absence of provision, it's the blindness to it. Think about it. Every great business you see today didn't begin with wealth. It began with someone noticing something other people ignored. Someone saw a gap, a need, or a simple idea, and instead of saying, "I don't have money," they said, "I'll use what I have." That's the difference between waiting for opportunity and creating one. And maybe that's why you're here watching this video. Maybe you're at that point in life where you feel stuck, broke, or unsure how to start. You might be working a job that pays just enough to survive, or maybe you've lost your job entirely. Maybe you have responsibilities, a family, bills piling up, and the thought of starting a business feels impossible. But let me tell you something I've learned the hard way. Impossible only lives in the mind that refuses to see what's possible. When I started to shift my awareness, I realized that every limitation I had was also an invitation to think differently, to see differently, to act differently. You see, business isn't just about selling something, it's about solving something. And you don't need millions to solve problems, you just need eyes to see them. The truth is, we're all surrounded by opportunities, but most of us are too distracted to notice. We scroll, we compare, we complain. We wait for a miracle instead of realizing that sometimes the miracle is in motion. It's already happening, but it needs your attention to grow. I remember a line from the Bible that changed how I think about business and wealth. It's from Genesis. Be fruitful and multiply. Notice it doesn't say, go and get more. It says, be fruitful. That means the potential for multiplication is already inside you. You just have to activate it. God never asked us to create something out of nothing. He already did that. What He asked is that we take what's already been created and make it fruitful. So if I were to start again, if I had nothing, no money, no fancy connections, no investors, what would I do? I'd start by asking a better question. Instead of how can I get money to start a business, I'd ask, what can I do with what I already have? That single shift in perspective will change everything. Because the truth is, it's not about having capital, it's about having clarity. And once you see clearly, your creativity follows. That's what awareness does. It unlocks your inner entrepreneur. It wakes you up from the belief that you need permission to start. You don't. You just need a decision to start. I know this might sound simple, maybe even cliche, but it's powerful when it becomes real. Think about the stories in the Bible. The widow's oil, the 5 loaves and 2 fish, Peter's empty nets. In every single case, God didn't create something new. He multiplied what was already there. That's how divine provision works. It's never about adding something you don't have. It's about awakening something you've ignored. So before I tell you what I would actually do if I had no money, I want you to remember this. The real capital isn't cash. It's consciousness. The wealthiest people are not the ones with the most resources, but the ones with the most awareness of their resources. And awareness is a skill you can develop. It's a muscle that grows every time you stop saying, I can't, and start asking, what can I do with what I have? And that's exactly what we'll talk about next. Because once you understand this foundation, this awareness, you'll see that starting a business with no money is not about luck or privilege. It's about learning to see the invisible assets around you and inside you. And when you master that, everything changes. You know what really changed everything for me? It wasn't learning a new marketing trick or finding an investor. It was the moment I realized that lack is just blindness in disguise. When you say, I don't have money, what you're really saying is, I can't see what I already have. And that's where most people stay stuck. Not because they have nothing, but because they can't see something. When I started seeing life through that new awareness, everything shifted. Suddenly, I stopped asking for blessing and started recognizing them. I stopped chasing after what was missing and began using what was present. That's when I understood God never withholds opportunities. We just fail to notice them. Think about this. If everything is already created, if all the laws of wealth, abundance, and success are already set in motion by God, then the question isn't, where do I get, but how do I see? Awareness is what activates potential. It's like the story of Hagar in the desert. She thought her son was about to die of thirst, and she cried out to God. But the Bible says, then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. The well was there all along. What changed wasn't her environment, it was her perception. And that's exactly what awareness does. It opens your spiritual and mental eyes to the provision that was already within your reach. Most people are living surrounded by wells, but they're dying of thirst because they don't know how to see them. That's how I lived for so many years. I thought my life was ordinary, that my family's bread business was just survival. A small thing, not worth dreaming about. I thought my purpose was somewhere out there, far away from home. But all along, the foundation of my future success was right in front of me. That's how blindness works. It makes what's familiar invisible. You get so used to your own environment that you can't see its potential anymore. You start assuming that success must come from somewhere else. A different city, a different job, a different idea. You start to envy others because their opportunity looks bigger than yours. But what if the only reason theirs looks bigger is because they learn to see what's small as valuable? Awareness shifts everything. It turns you from a victim of your circumstances into a creator of your outcomes. It doesn't change what you have, it changes how you use it. That's why Jesus said, he who has eyes, let him see. He wasn't talking about physical eyes. He was talking about awareness. Because if you can see what others overlook, you can build what others only dream about. The truth is, every successful person started where they were, not where they wished to be. They didn't wait for money, they found leverage in what they had. Some used skills, some used relationships, some used creativity, but they all started with awareness. They noticed the invisible patterns of opportunity that most people ignore. And that's when I began to understand something profound. Money doesn't create business. Awareness does. Because money without awareness is waste. But awareness without money becomes wealth. Awareness creates value, and value attracts money. When I started seeing my environment differently, everything that looked small began to multiply. What once felt like limitation started to feel like leverage. That's also when I started noticing how society trains us to look outside for answers. From school, we're taught to follow systems that reward obedience, not creativity. We're trained to wait for instructions, not to build innovations. And so when it comes to business, we automatically think, I need permission. I need money. I need help. We forget that the very first instruction God gave humanity wasn't to wait, it was to create, be fruitful and multiply. That's not just about producing children, it's about producing results, producing growth, producing solutions. It's about turning what's invisible into something tangible. That's what business is. It's creation in motion. It's turning ideas into experiences, concepts into income, gifts into impact. But you can't do any of that if you don't first become aware of what you've been given. So, if you feel like you don't have enough, I want you to pause and ask yourself, what am I overlooking? What do you have that you've been calling nothing? Because I promise you that nothing is probably your hidden seed. The thing that looks too small to matter might just be the thing that changes everything. When I finally started waking up to that truth, I realized that I didn't need new blessings. I needed new eyes. I didn't need more tools. I needed more understanding. I didn't need to pray for resources. I needed to recognize them. That's why I say awareness is the real starting point of business. Without it, you can't see value. And if you can't see value, you'll never create it. So if you're sitting there right now thinking, I want to start, but I have nothing, I want you to shift your focus. Look around. What skills do you already have? What problems do people come to you for? What connections or materials are already in your circle? What habits or experiences shaped your perspective? Because every one of those things can be turned into something valuable if you have the awareness to see it. You see, awareness isn't about thinking positive, it's about thinking properly. It's not pretending that everything is perfect. It's perceiving that everything has purpose. And when you start living with that mindset, you stop waiting for luck and start walking in design. That's when miracles happen. Not because God suddenly decided to bless you, but because you finally became aware of how blessed you already were. And that's why awareness will always be more powerful than capital. Because capital without awareness will be wasted. But awareness, even without capital, will always find a way to multiply. That's the difference between people who stay stuck and those who rise. The ones who rise are not those who get more. They're the ones who see more. So if I were to start a business again with zero money, no followers, no investors, no connections, the first thing I would do is awaken my awareness. Because once your awareness expands, you'll start to see opportunities that were always there, but hidden. You'll notice the patterns, the gaps, the invisible doors. You'll understand that business is not about creating something new. It's about seeing what already exists through a higher level of consciousness. And when you reach that point of awareness, you'll never say, I have nothing again. Because now you know, everything you need is already here. You just have to open your eyes. You know what I realized after becoming aware of my surroundings and opportunities? It wasn't the resources around me that needed to change. It was me. I used to think that success was about finding the right business idea. I'd watch people online and think, if only I knew what they were doing, I'd be rich too. I jumped from one idea to another, hoping that somewhere out there was the perfect business. But the truth is, it's not about finding the right business. It's about becoming the right person. That's where most people miss it. They keep asking, what business should I start? But they never stop to ask, what kind of person do I need to become to succeed in business? Because here's the truth, your business can never outgrow your identity. If you start a business with fear, it will always operate from fear. If you start with scarcity, it will always attract scarcity. If you start with faith and discipline, it will grow from the same seed. Identity is the soil where your business grows. That's why two people can start the same business in the same city, with the same tools, and one thrives while the other fails. It's not luck. It's not talent. It's alignment. One person has the right mindset, habits, and identity to sustain growth. The other doesn't. That's when I began to understand the principle Myron Golden and Bob Proctor often talk about, the be-do-have principle. For so long, I lived backwards. I thought, once I have money, then I'll do the business and then I'll become successful. But that's the world's system. God's system is the opposite. He says, be first, then do, then have. The being comes first because what you do comes out of who you are. You don't become a successful person after you get results. You become successful in your mind and heart before you see them. And that mindset creates the actions that lead to the results. That realization hit me hard. I had been trying to do so many things without becoming the kind of person who could sustain them. That's why I kept quitting. Every time something got difficult, I'd shift to something new. I was addicted to starting, not to growing. I was chasing excitement, not commitment. But growth doesn't come from excitement. It comes from identity. When I changed my self-concept from I'm trying to start a business to I'm a business person who's growing, everything changed. My focus shifted. My discipline grew. My awareness deepened. I realized that God never blesses confusion. He blesses conviction. And conviction only comes from identity. When I finally understood this, I stopped being a wanderer in the business world. I stopped asking, what can I sell? And started asking, who can I become? Because if I can become the kind of person who is disciplined, consistent, and faithful, then any business I touch will eventually succeed. This is where faith and physics actually agree. In the physical world, energy follows form. Your identity is that form. Whatever vibration you carry inside will shape your outer experience. In the spiritual world, it's the same. Your internal belief system defines the kind of results you attract. That's why Jesus said, "A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit." He was talking about identity. The fruit, your results, will always match the tree, your being. So before I could build a fruitful business, I had to work on becoming the right kind of tree. That meant dealing with my habits, my fears, and my laziness. It meant looking in the mirror and realizing that no amount of motivation could fix a weak identity. I had to develop character. Because character is what keeps the doors open after talent gets you in. And that's where most people get it wrong. They're trying to learn how to start, how to market, how to grow. But they never build the why and the who behind the how. The how is mechanical. The who is spiritual. And it's the spiritual foundation that sustains everything else. If your why is weak, you'll quit the moment things get uncomfortable. But if your identity is rooted in purpose, you'll endure storms others can't survive. Because identity doesn't chase trends, it stands firm. I once heard Jim Rohn say, "Work harder on yourself than you do on your job." At first I didn't understand it, but over time it made perfect sense. The person you become determines the income you attract. You can't earn beyond your self-concept. You'll always return to the level of your internal thermostat. That's why millionaires who lose everything can rebuild it again. They didn't just build a business, they built a mindset. And that's why some people win the lottery and lose it all. They had the money, but not the identity to keep it. So if I had to start again with no money, I'd start with my identity. I'd start by asking, who do I need to become to manage the blessings I'm praying for? Because if I'm not the kind of person who can handle abundance, abundance will destroy me. Before capital comes character. Before scaling comes stewardship. Before business success comes personal discipline. Because God doesn't just want to give you a business. He wants to make sure you can handle it. He doesn't just bless hands. He blesses hearts. And if your heart isn't ready, even the best opportunities will feel like burdens. That's what I've learned. The true foundation of business is not money, not marketing, not a product. It's identity. The moment you decide who you are, everything else aligns. Your habits, your awareness, your discipline, all flow from that. And once that foundation is set, capital becomes a tool, not a master. So before you ask, what business should I start? Stop and ask, who am I becoming? Because if you can become the person who sees, acts, and believes at a higher level, the how will reveal itself naturally. That's why in the next part, we'll talk about what to actually do when you have no money. But before that, remember this truth. You don't build a business to find yourself. You build yourself to create the business. And once you truly understand that, no lack of capital can ever stop you again. When I finally understood that identity is the foundation, everything changed. Because once you know who you are, the how becomes clear. It's almost automatic. That's the beauty of awareness. It doesn't just give you knowledge, it gives you direction. So if I had no money today and I had to start a business again, I wouldn't look for capital. I'd look for clarity. I'd sit down and ask myself one simple question. What do I already have in my hands right now that I can use? Most people don't ask that. They focus on what's missing, not what's available. They look at their empty wallet instead of their full potential. But I learned that everything starts with inventory. Not financial inventory, but internal and environmental inventory. When you're broke, your greatest advantage isn't money. It's creativity. It's resourcefulness. It's the ability to turn something ordinary into something valuable. Because once you see differently, you start acting differently. You start acting differently. If I were starting over, I'd begin by looking around me, just like I did before, at my environment, at what's within reach. Maybe you don't have money, but you have time. Maybe you don't have a product, but you have skills. Maybe you don't have a store, but you have a phone. You can turn attention into opportunity if you know how to use it. I remember when our bread business was struggling. We didn't have investors or big savings. We just had trays of bread, a delivery route, and loyal customers who loved our products. At first, I thought it was too small to grow into something meaningful. But then I realized that's the perfect place to start. I began thinking, what if more people could access what we already have? That's when I brought it online. I took what was already working and expanded its reach. That's the secret. You don't need to start from scratch. You just need to scale what already exists. You see, God never multiplies nothing. He multiplies something. The widow didn't start with an empty jar. She started with a little oil. The miracle came through motion, not through waiting. And that's how abundance always works. It follows awareness and action. If I had to begin again, I'd follow that same principle. I'd take the smallest thing I have and ask, how can I multiply this? Maybe you can bake, sew, design, teach, repair, write, edit, or market. Whatever it is, there's value in it, but value only grows when you use it. And here's another thing. When you're broke, the worst thing you can do is chase 10 ideas at once. Focus multiplies results, but distraction multiplies frustration. I used to be the kind of person who tried everything. I'd start a business, give it a few weeks, and when it didn't explode immediately, I'd move to another one. I didn't realize I was training myself to quit fast. The truth is, every idea takes time to mature. The seed doesn't become a tree overnight. You have to plant it, water it, protect it, and wait for the right season. That's not just business advice, that's biblical. Ecclesiastes says, "To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven." If you rush the process, you destroy the promise. So instead of asking, what's the next big thing, ask, what's the one small thing I can grow consistently? That one question alone can save you years of frustration. Because when you start from zero, the secret is not to create more work, it's to create more value. People don't pay you because you're busy. They pay you because you solve a problem. The moment I stopped chasing trends and started focusing on how to serve people better, my business began to grow almost naturally. And when you focus on solving real problems, money becomes a byproduct. The more people you help, the more valuable you become. That's what wealth really is. Your ability to serve more people in less time with greater impact. But all of that begins with using what you have. When you take that first step, something powerful happens. You start attracting help. People begin to notice. Doors start to open. Not because of luck, but because motion creates momentum. God doesn't move for those who are still sitting in fear. He moves with those who move in faith. If I had no money, I'd start small. But I'd start now. I'd use free tools, free platforms, free learning resources. You can build almost anything with just a phone and an internet connection. You don't need a full plan. You just need a first move. When I started our business online, I didn't know all the answers. I just knew I had bread to sell, people to feed, and a reason to keep going. That was enough. And here's the secret truth about business. Your first product isn't the real product. You are. People buy you before they buy what you sell. That's why identity matters. That's why awareness matters. Because if people can feel your conviction, your authenticity, your intention to serve, they'll trust you even when you're small. So if you're broke right now, don't look for something new. Look for what's true, what's already working, what you already love, what already adds value. Then expand that. Because here's what I've learned. When you're faithful with small things, big things come naturally. It's not magic, it's principle. And principles don't change. They always produce what they promise. If you take care of what's in your hands today, it will open what's in your future tomorrow. That's the mindset I carry now. If everything were stripped away and I had to start again, I'd begin with faith, focus, and awareness. I'd find something I can give, not something I can get. Because when you give value first, abundance always follows. You can't fake faithfulness. You either live it or you don't. But once you do, you'll start seeing how much power you really have, even when you think you're broke. And that's what I want to show you in the next part. How these invisible resources, your skills, your environment, your relationships, are actually capital in disguise. Because once you learn to use them the right way, You'll never say, "I have no money" again. When I talk about starting a business without money, people often ask, "But how can I begin if I literally have nothing?" And my answer is always the same. You don't have nothing. You just haven't seen what you have yet. That's what I call invisible capital. It's the value that doesn't show up in your bank account, but determines how far you can go. It's your skills, your relationships, your mindset, your faith, your story, and your ability to solve problems. When I started, I didn't have investors or equipment or a clear business model. But I had parents who had been baking bread for years. I had a tricycle we used for delivery. I had a phone with internet. That's invisible capital. It's ordinary to the eyes, but extraordinary in potential. Most people overlook what's right in front of them because they think opportunity must look glamorous. But God rarely gives success in a shiny box. He hides it in your environment, waiting for awareness to reveal it. That's why awareness is wealth. The moment you see what you have, you activate abundance. In the Bible, there's a verse that says, "Do not despise the day of small beginnings," because small beginnings carry divine blueprints. Every great business, every empire, every idea started with something small, something others overlooked. If I had known this truth earlier, I wouldn't have wasted so much time wishing for capital. I would have invested more time developing my character and expanding my vision. Because when your vision is strong enough, resources appear. When I began turning our family bread delivery into an online business, I didn't have a grand plan. I just had a conviction that if I could get people to see the product, they would love it. So I started posting, reaching out, telling stories. At first, it was slow, almost discouraging. But I remembered the principle: consistency is currency. Every post was like planting a seed, and slowly those seeds started to grow. Orders came in. Customers shared. Referrals multiplied. The business that once felt small became something sustainable, even scalable. That's the lesson I want you to get. You don't need to chase what's far away. You need to nurture what's already in your hands. Invisible capital is also your network. You don't need to know everyone, you just need to know someone. A satisfied customer becomes a walking advertisement. A supportive friend becomes your first investor. A mentor's advice becomes a shortcut worth more than cash. And then there's spiritual capital. The favor you receive when you walk in purpose. That's something you can't buy or borrow. It's something you attract when you move with integrity and faith. When I look back, the biggest shift didn't happen in my bank account, it happened in my mind. I stopped saying, "I can't afford it," and started asking, "How can I make this happen?" That small shift unlocked creativity. And creativity is divine currency. You see, lack is never the absence of money. It's the absence of awareness. The poor and the rich walk in the same world, but they see different things. The poor see limits, the rich see leverage. That's why I believe awareness is wealth. It transforms your reality. When you operate from this mindset, you stop begging and start building. You stop chasing trends and start mastering principles. You stop doubting what's in your hands and start using it with faith. Now, if I lost everything today, I'd still never say I'm starting from zero. Because I carry invisible capital. I've built systems, experiences, resilience, and faith, and that's what produces lasting wealth. And here's something most people miss. When you manage what you have well, you attract what you don't yet have. That's why the Bible says, "He who is faithful with little will be made ruler over much." It's not about luck. It's about stewardship. If you can handle a few customers with excellence, you're preparing for hundreds. If you can stay disciplined with a small budget, you're training for abundance. If you can stay grateful in a slow season, you're preparing for overflow. Success isn't a sudden event, it's a gradual elevation of awareness. So if I were to start again from scratch, I wouldn't stress about investors or funding. I'd start by serving, by asking, "Who can I help today?" Because money flows towards service. People pay for solutions, not dreams. And that's how every great entrepreneur I know began. Not with capital, but with courage. Not with wealth, but with work. Not with certainty, but with faith. If you can master that mindset, seeing every obstacle as an opportunity in disguise, you'll never fear starting again. Because you'll know that you're never truly starting over. You're starting from experience. So let me close with this thought. When you believe that everything you need is already within reach, you stop waiting for miracles and start becoming one. That's the heart of entrepreneurship. It's not about money, it's about mastery. It's about realizing that God doesn't bless plans, He blesses principles. And those principles never fail. Awareness, faithfulness, focus, and action. That's how I started. That's how I'd start again. And that's how you can start, right where you are, with what you already have. Because when you finally see that nothing is missing, you'll realize you've had abundance all along.